Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That's Brian Driscoll, and we are here for our normal Monday show. We are eventually going to get to the defensive line and our thoughts on the defensive line, where they're going to be, what they're going to do, and all that fun stuff. But obviously, as we were getting ready for the show, we had some breaking news that, of course, we need to discuss and we need to address and all of that stuff. And, this was news to us as well. I mean, this is all brand new information. And so we are digesting it along with the rest of you. That news that the Notre Dame PR department just put out on social media is that Charles Jagusah is injured. He injured. It's an upper body injury. Specifically, Brian, you want to get into the details, you can, but it's an upper body injury that's going to keep him out for the season. Also, Marty Auer was also a part of that announcement, so we'll put that in there as well, that he is also going to be out with an ACL tear, and both are expected to have surgery here this week, and obviously not good for the outlook of the season for either one of these guys. But Charles Jagusah being the starting left tackle is the news that we are going to discuss here.
Yeah, Vince, and I was still finishing up writing as you were saying that. And
okay.
I don't know if you said this, but did you say that he is out for the year?
Yes,
I
did say that.
Out for the year.
I didn't say the specific injury because I don't remember exactly what it was, but I know it's an upper body injury.
Yeah, it was just reading directly from Notre Dame, right pectoralis muscle in his shoulder.
So, yeah, okay.
They said once his surgery is complete, he will miss the season. So that's a big blow for Notre Dame, obviously. I mean, let's state the obvious, right? This is
right
for Notre Dame. And Charles Jagusah was expected to be your starting left tackle. And I don't care if your starting left tackle is projected to be a redshirt freshman or a redshirt sophomore or a sixth-year senior.
Nope.
When you lose your starting, left tackle, that's a big blow. And Notre Dame's going to have to find some answers. And there are some there. The question is okay, well, what does this do for the overall makeup of the offensive line? We'll dive into that. But the biggest thing is, Vince, let's talk about Jagusah first. This is a blow for the team, but it's also a blow for Jagusah. I mean, He's going to miss a year of development in a very important year for development. And that's big. I mean, you have a 5-star kid, 6'7", 330, massive young man, talented young man, and he goes out in not even through the first week of fall camp and he goes down, and it's a big blow for him. So he's gonna miss what was a very important part of his development. And now that doesn't mean he's not going to be the player we thought he was going to be or any of that. It just means, it slows down his development.
Sure.
Does this mean he can get back for maybe the postseason, whether that's to be practicing or playing? I don't know the answer to that, obviously, but Notre Dame said he's out for the year. Maybe that changes as they get in there and do some work. I don't have an answer to that either. So like I said, we'll do some diving into that. I don't want to presume that we have information that we don't. I just don't know what this injury means.
Yeah.
In regard to what I mean, is he going to be back for the spring? Like, I really don't know the answers to that, but I do know that for Charles, this is a big loss because it's a big year of development. And for Notre Dame, it means you're going to have to go with someone that you don't believe is your best left tackle to be your left tackle this season.
Sure.
The good news, Vince, is they've recruited the position pretty well.
Yeah.
But you already had some uncertainty at left tackle because Charles is a redshirt freshman with one career start. Now there's even greater uncertainty, and this now potentially could impact 2 positions, depending on what Notre Dame decides to do with the right tackle spot. But I will say this, Vince, because I want to be honest about where this is, but also, talk about some positives. And look, here is a positive from this. There's no positives for the injury. I'm more referring to the timing.
Sure.
The fact that it happened not even a full week into fall camp means you have almost a month to kind of get prepared to play without Charles. That is a much... Like, if this is going to happen, and
right.
It sucks no matter when it happens. It's a blow no matter when it happens. But if you know it's going to happen, and it's going to happen in fall camp, getting it done early in the first week of fall camp is huge. I mean, if you think about it, Vince, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, yesterday was the first day of full pads. Today's only the second day of full pads, and they're already going to be working with whoever their next left tackle is going to be, or at least figuring out who that's going to be. So,
and I think they said it happened on August 3rd, which was the day that we were there in the like at the first part. I think is what it said.
That would be Saturday. The
was
3rd was Saturday.
So
yeah.
we
were there the second. We were there on the second.
Okay, we were there on Friday. Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, they've had a couple of days to digest this too, and they've had a couple of days to kind of figure out what the plan is, at least the starting plan moving forward. And so this isn't something that just happened this morning. They've had, I want to say, at least a practice, because I believe they practiced today. So they've had at least a practice to start working on whatever answer or whatever potential answers that there is going to be. And you're right. It makes a lot of sense. Well, I shouldn't say it makes a lot of sense. That's not the right terminology. Having it happen when it did gives a good amount of time, because they're not even in, prep for the first week. I mean, they're
still well over a week away from that.
They're
a week and a half away from that.
I mean, they're still doing stances and starts, and they're doing drill work, and they're doing all these different things that you do during fall camp. I mean, they're a ways away yet from even game planning for Texas A&M. So, you've got some time. This didn't happen in the middle of the season where you've got 3 practices to get somebody else ready. You've got some time. Again, there's nothing good about this situation as far as losing your left tackle. We're not going to sugarcoat that for you. We were all extremely excited about Charles Jagusah and what he was going to be able to do on the left side, and he was going to be, an integral part of what this offensive line was going to be, and he had that spot locked down, period. I mean, that was his spot. And so now questions, right? We have questions. I'm sure they have more answers than questions, but it's not just plug and play either, I don't think. Yeah. I believe there are multiple options depending on which route they want to take, or if they want to test out each route, see which one works best. Yeah. I mean, you've got some time to do that.
And I'll say this, there's a lot of people kind of freaking out in the chat about this, and they're comparing this to 2021. And this is the point that we're talking about. Like in 2021, Blake Fisher got hurt in the first half of the first game of the year. And they spent the next month trying to figure out who their starting left tackle was going to be.
They went to 4.
They went to Michael Carmody, and then he got hurt, and he didn't play well. They went to Tosh Baker. He didn't play well. Then he got hurt. And then eventually they went to Joe Alt. And it took into game 6 or 7 before they eventually went to Joe Alt, right? Because they didn't have time to figure out who that was going to be. They had to kind of put someone in there and get ready to go win a football game. The whole point of what we're talking about now, guys, is that this is completely different than the 2021 situation, because they have so much more time.
We got time.
And that's the biggest difference. Now, we don't know if there's a Joe Alt on the roster who can eventually step in and solidify things. We don't know what that answer is going to be. And we'll talk about here next what we think Notre Dame might do and what we would do, right? I mean, we'll give that opinion as well. But this is a different situation than 2021 because of the timing. And that's the exact reason that we brought that up. I've said this before, Vince. You never want to lose a guy in season, ever. And Notre Dame has just lost a guy in season. If you're going to lose a guy in season, you want it to be as early as possible, so that way you have time to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Notre Dame is going to have to figure out what they're going to do, because they have to find some answers. I think it was like 2020. It was 2015 too, right? I believe they lost Jerron Jones in the first week of fall camp. Remember that? And all of a sudden you gave Jerry Tillery a month to practice, and eventually Jerry takes over and he becomes a starting nose tackle, right? I mean, so you had time to prepare to do that. They're going to have time to prepare for Charles Jagusah, which is in an imperfect situation is an ideal scenario, because now you have time. Because let's say they decide to make a move. We're going to put this guy over at left tackle. And after a week, it's like, okay, this isn't happening. This isn't the guy. Well, now they still have 2.5 weeks at least to put somebody else out there before they have to go play a football game. So
yeah,
it is not good. It's not ideal. It's not like, don't worry, their line's going to be phenomenal still. This is a blow. I don't know what their offensive line is going to look like. This took the biggest question mark on the team, in my opinion. I said it in the show. Takes the biggest question mark on the team, and it makes it an even bigger question mark.
Yeah.
And then also just for Charles, specifically to Charles Vince, and next we'll talk about what comes next For Charles specifically, this is a blow because I never like when linemen have shoulder injuries. That always makes me nervous when guys have shoulder injuries.
Sure.
And so, we'll see how he bounces back from this. But yeah, it's a tough blow. But I mean, timeline-wise, if he got hurt on the 3rd, that means this is going to be the second practice in which they have done it because they practiced yesterday. Because they will practice on Sundays in fall camp.
Gotcha. Well, and they practice Sundays during the school year too.
Well, they do like some walkthrough stuff. I don't know that they did the night practices last year like they did 2 years.
Okay. I guess that's what I probably remembering.
Yeah, they did that 2 years ago. I don't know that they did that last year. But the point being, you've got time. They've got time to figure out the answers, which means they can experiment a little bit. Where if you get a guy hurt like Blake Fisher did, you just kind of got to roll with it. And okay, let's see. Hopefully this is our next in line. So hopefully he's good. And then you don't find out for a couple games before you're like, he ain't the guy.
And that's tough. That's a tough spot to be in. I mean, they went through 4 total left tackles that season and eventually obviously settled on a future All-American. But if they knew he was going to be an All-American, he would have been the first man in. I mean, they had to figure it out. He's a true freshman. I mean, you kind of had to go through the list, right? Well,
I mean, looking back, he probably should have played a lot sooner. But
they knew they wanted him on the field because that's why they gave him the tight end number and they were using him a lot.
The light didn't just go on the week of the Virginia Tech game. We always talk about this, but that's a different conversation for a different day. So, Vince, let's talk about what's next.
Yeah.
Because they got to find answers, right? Like, look, we can wallow in self-pity about Charles Jagusah going down and just cancel the season and call Texas A&M and say, listen, guys, we're just going to forfeit the first game because – we can't block your tackles, your defensive ends. And so we're just going to chalk that up as an L. We don't want anybody else to get hurt, and we're just going to get ready for Northern Illinois, right? I mean, you can do that, or you can say, okay, got to go out and win a football game. A&M's going to have some injuries at some point in time, moving forward here as well. So we'll see kind of how it plays out. But now it's like as coaches, like, man, it sucks. You sit – this is how it goes in meeting rooms, Vince. I know you've been in these.
Yep.
You kind of, for about 10 minutes, you just like, man, 5-10 minutes, like this freaking sucks. Like this just blows. You feel for the kid. You hurt for the kid. You wonder what you're going to do. And then it's like, all right, what do we do? Let's figure it out. Let's find some answers. And that's what we're going to do right now.
To be honest with you, it's kind of what you and I did. we saw the news and we're like, God, man, that really sucks. And then you're like, hey, I got to write an article. And you're getting in there and you're doing your thing. And I'm going over my head like, what? Okay. So yes, this is terrible. This is awful news. Okay. Where do they go from here? What do they do? And so we did the exact same thing to be out. Well, I mean, we're coaches, so I mean, it makes sense, but it's a cliche, no doubt about it, but it is kind of a next man up situation.
Yeah.
And so they've got to figure out who that next man is. Now, there's a couple different routes that they can go with this, right, Brian? I mean, you obviously have a battle going on, or in theory, there's a battle going on at right tackle between Tosh Baker and Emil Wagner. Now, it had appeared that Emil Wagner had kind of taken the lead in that battle. So do you just take the guy who was a possibility for right tackle and move him to left tackle? Do you take Emil Wagner, move him to left tackle, and keep Tosh at right tackle? I think that one of those two scenarios would be the first thing that you talk about, right? I mean, that's the first.
Yeah.
Case
I mean,
your
first thought is your two tackles are now Emil and Tosh.
Sure.
The question, however, is which one do you move over?
Exactly.
Like, that's the question. And now I'll give you what my guess is, but then I'll also tell you what may be some other things that this staff has to consider. If it was up to me, I would not if it's up to me. If I'm guessing what I think they'll do, it's moving Emil Wagner to left tackle. That is what I think that they'll do. Now, that Emil has all the tools to be a left tackle. He's long, he's athletic, he's got strong hands, he can handle himself. That would be my guess as to what I think that they'll do. But there's some things that you need to think about if you're Notre Dame. Number one being Emil's never played left tackle in college. He's going to his third year, and he's only really played right tackle. Emil still has to show himself a little bit as a pass blocker. Pass blocking has been the area where he's needed the most work, from technically speaking, but then also because of his weight, right? So do you move him over to left tackle knowing that that's a bit of an issue and just say, hey, we got to teach this guy and get this guy going and hey, we got to figure it out, right? How comfortable are you with where he's at? Now, my thought is, Vince, he doesn't get put into the starting lineup day one of fall camp if he hasn't shown himself well at the end of spring and summer practices, right? I mean, that's the case. So
Agreed.
that's why I say if they're comfortable with him as a pass blocker, then I would say just move Emil over to the left side. And you just slide Tosh into the right tackle spot.
Sure.
The counter to that, however, is Tosh has played left tackle. Tosh has started games at left tackle at Notre Dame.
True.
Tosh is a little bit more dependable than Emil as a pass blocker based on the past. They got to evaluate if they still feel that way now. I don't know the answer to that. So I'm not saying that's what I would do. I'm not saying it's what I think they're going to do. I think it's something you need to consider. Can Emil, who's just starting to get comfortable at right tackle, go over to left and say, well, it's the same thing? No, it's completely flipping everything you've been doing. You flip your stance, you flipped your hand play, your line of sight completely changes. Like, it's something that's just right in the middle of fall camp is going to take an adjustment period for Emil Wagner.
Well, and not to mention the fact that you were playing next to a guy that you knew was going to be the left guard or the right guard, and now you're going to be playing next to a bit of a timeshare, at least during camp, because they haven't decided who the left guard is going to be. And so you've worked this entire time, okay, getting the communication down with the same guy over and over again, and that's part of it, right? I mean, communication is a huge part of being on the offensive line, and now you're going to move to a spot where there's some indecision about who is going to be working next to you. So now you're going to have to work on communication with two different guys,
right?
You know what I mean? So that's also something to consider too.
So I mean, I'm very curious to see what they do. And it wouldn't shock me if they give both of them some reps at left tackle. And
sure.
I think that would be smart.
See who takes to it the best. Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Yes. Yeah. And just see if Emil can do it, but don't wait for 2 weeks and then you realize Emil can't play left-handed. Right. And then you move Tosh over. I would give them both some reps right now at left tackle and just see who's most comfortable there, with the thought that if everything goes the way that you hope it does as a staff, Emil makes an easy, smooth transition and Tosh just slides in a right tackle. I think that's the hope right now, at least for now. Now, there's some other things that need to happen, Vince, or at least be considered. The number 2 left tackle in fall camp's Anthony Knapp. I don't think Anthony Knapp is physically ready to play right now. So I don't think this is just slide Anthony Knapp into the first team. That's not how it works in college football. Just because you're the number 2 doesn't mean you're the next guy in at that particular position, right? If the right guard goes down, it doesn't matter. Whoever loses the battle between Coogan and Spindler is probably just going to slide in over at right tackle. That's just a right guard. That's the reality of it. So then there's some other options Notre Dame has to consider. One of them is Sullivan Absher, who was the number 2 left tackle behind Jagusah in the bowl game. And you could, now when I say Sullivan Absher, I don't think Sullivan Absher at left tackle is what I'm looking at. To me, it would be more of, does Sullivan Absher now go over to right tackle? Maybe you play him a left tackle, see what I can do, but I just don't think Sullivan's a natural left tackle. You could say, hey, look, he's playing guard right now. He's still playing left-handed. Let's kick him out and give him some reps at left tackle. I would do that in some one-on-one situations to just see kind of who looks the best. But I would also think that you need to consider maybe doing this to give him some work at right tackle to just solidify the tackle depth chart. Because right now, the way that it looks, the way that the depth chart looks, it's based on where guys have been playing in fall camp. It's Emil and Tosh at tackle. Whoever's left, whoever's right. Behind that, it's 2 true freshmen, Gery Lambert and Anthony Knapp. Right? Like, I don't know that you want to go into the season with one more injury and we have to play a freshman. So this is also partly why you have to think about having Sullivan Absher start to get some tackle reps right now. I think that's the other part of it, Vince, is you have to consider. It's like, this isn't just about who's your new left starter. This is also about, okay, we need to rethink the entire depth chart because we now need to be prepared. Well, what if there's another injury at tackle? Who's the next guy in? And say, yeah, we would love to give Sullivan a chance to start at that left guard spot. But unless he's right now like, dude, I think he's as good as those other 2 guys, you may need to put that on pause for now and at least sort of, even if it's just cross-training him a little bit, you at least need to do that and see kind of how he does over there. That would be another thing that I would look at, Vince, as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard a lot of good things about Sully and what he's been able to do, and even Marcus Freeman has brought him up you know, and about, you know, he's kind of ascending and all
They
of these
love
different.
him.
They love him, absolutely,
But there's a reason they moved him to guard.
right, for sure,
You know what I mean? That's the position we always felt he was best at.
right,
And
right.
a position where they were hoping that he would battle for that left guard job. But I mean,
But
but the point is, Vince, they put him behind those veteran guys to battle. That says
absolutely,
something. They
yes.
put him in a position to battle a couple 10+ game starters. That tells you a little bit about what they think about Sullivan Absher.
After Sullivan Absher, then you're looking at the 2 true freshmen, and you've got Anthony Knapp, who you kind of discussed already, and then you've got, you know, Gery Lambert, and obviously a lot of publicity for Gery coming in, and rightfully so. Yeah, don't get me wrong, rightfully so. But, you know, where is he in his development to actually be on the field for a team that is a potential playoff bound team, right? I mean, this isn't, you know, a team where, you know, this year is kind of a throwaway and you just want to get a guy some experience. This is a team where there's a lot of high expectations for this offense and for this team. And so is Gery Lambert at a point in his development where you can kind of throw him in there and see what happens? You know, I think they're going to give him an opportunity, you know, to see where he's at, give him a chance to battle a little bit. I don't know that they're going into like this morning thinking Gery Lambert's our starter at left tackle. I don't think that's the thought process. At least I wouldn't
Probably
think
not.
so. But I think it would be, hey,
Or
man,
right.
let's get this kid some reps and see kind of where he stacks up.
Yeah. You have to. I mean, you have to. Like, look, there's some other things they're going to do. They'll probably put Tai Chan out to tackle and let him get some reps. He's not the answer. We've seen that last fall. We saw that in the spring. We saw this. He's an inside guy. He doesn't have the athleticism, in my opinion, to play tackle. If they have to play him, that's a problem. There's some other guys people are going to mention. You know, can Billy Schrouth play? You want to make these moves where you do at least damage to as many positions as possible.
You don't need it to be a domino effect.
That's the other reason you maybe consider, do you move Tosh over to left tackle? Because now your other 4 spots aren't being affected by this. Right. I mean, those are things you have to at least consider. All things are on the table right now, in my opinion. Yeah. And the reason Anthony Knapp was at left tackle is because Tosh can't play 2 positions at once. Emil can't play 2 positions at once. As I said earlier, the reality is when Charles Jagusah goes down, one of those 2 guys is the easy answer to who's going to be the left tackle.
Right.
And that's what they're going to work on. But in regard to Gery Lambert specifically, you have to say, okay, I mean, if you're Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock, you're pulling Joe Rudolph into your office and saying, you now need to put the Gery Lambert development plan on overdrive.
Yeah, it's in fast forward now.
You could take your time with Gery and just let him learn in a natural process 3 days ago. Mm-hmm. Friday, when we were there, you didn't need Gery Lambert to necessarily be that guy right now because of how well Emil had ascended. Like, Emil's ascension and what the staff has said about him to us, privately and publicly, says, okay, I think they're good at right tackle. You don't have to play Gery now. You only play him if he's ready. Mm-hmm. Now it's figure it out, Joe, right? Like, figure it out. You got an elite 6'7", 320-pound, 36. I was told this 36-inch arms, just insane arm length. Athletic kid, figure it out, right? Like, you got to figure it out. Like, I remember one of the best lessons I heard as a coach, Mike Donnelly calls me in. We're moving a linebacker, Chris Brown, over to fullback. And he's like, this kid's really athletic. He was 6'1", 230, really athletic kid, didn't know how to play fullback. And this was a Coach Donnelly, Coach Goff told me, get him ready. All right. What? How? It's my first year as a coach. Get him ready. It's your job. Figure it out. And so, you know, what I did was I'd meet with him extra time after practice. We'd get on the board. I'd have him. You spend time with him before practice, after practice. I mean, there's a lot. You spend more film work with him. You give him directives on what he needs to be looking at film. And by the time we got to our first full game, Chris Brown was ready to help us out. And, you know, we had the best season in school history. So, and we were a running football team. So that's what Joe Rudolph figured out, right? But you've got to get 76 ready to help us this year. That simple as that. He needs to be developed to be that next guy if there's a need there. Yeah. He figured out. And I understand that, you know, right now, technically Anthony Knapp's ahead of him, but if you're going to go that route, no, I'm sorry. Get the 6'7". You don't put the 280 plus pound kid that's 6'3.5" as your number 2 left tackle. You just don't do that because he's more advanced. It's your job as the offensive line coach to figure out how to get your 6'7", 320-pound, long-armed, athletic 5-star kid ready to go. Mm-hmm. And if you can't figure out how to get him ready, at least being your 2 deep, then maybe you're not the answer. I mean, I'm just saying, right? So, unfortunately, I think this forces Gery to have to grow up a lot faster than Charles had to grow up. They didn't need Charles last year. They didn't. They had Joe Alt. They had Blake Fisher. They had Emil Wagner. They had Tosh Baker. They were solid 2 deep of guys that were talented and sophomores or older. Now you're in a situation where it's like, hey, brother, sorry, man, but you gotta go into tomorrow's practice with a whole different attitude than the one you had the day before. And I'm saying that to Gery Lambert. I'm saying that to Anthony Knapp, and I'm saying that to Joe Rudolph. If I'm Mike Denbrock and Marcus Freeman. Hey, man, you got to go into this with a whole different attitude. Your young bucks can't afford to take a year to develop now. You got to get Gery Lambert ready to play.
Yeah.
You got to get him ready to play, whether that's left tackle, right tackle. My thought is getting Gery ready to play right tackle would be my thought. That way, just because that's what he's done. But if you feel like, hey, figure it out.
Yeah,
because this is about solidifying your entire tackle depth chart now, Vince. This isn't just about left tackle. Because if Emil's not the guy or Emil gets hurt, you probably move Tosh over there. But what do you do at right tackle if that happens? That's why I'm saying you need to get Gery ready to go. And if he grows up quick, maybe he is a swing guy that can play left or right. But I think it's more of the veterans will be the swing guys, and then you may need to put Gery in a right tackle. But he needs to be in your 2 deep now, and you've got to get him ready to go. It's simple as that. You've got talent there. You got to coach it up. I mean, that's the reality of it. It also puts a lot more on you need to figure out that left guard battle maybe a little sooner than expected.
Yeah. Yes.
To your point about earlier, Vince.
Yeah. Well, and here's the very interesting part is that this happened in the middle of the season. We wouldn't know until game day what was about to happen. We're going to get a little bit of a view tomorrow because it's an open practice for the first 5 periods. And so, obviously a lot of attention is going to be on the offensive line and what they're going to be up to doing their individual drills and, things of that nature. Will we see the definitive answer? Of course not. But we might get a peek into maybe the thought process as to what they're attempting to accomplish here on August 6th, which is tomorrow, what they're thinking, like where they're at in the process. We might get a little bit of a peek into that tomorrow morning, but we'll let you know. I promise you, we will let you know tomorrow what we see.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Tomorrow's show will kick off with a practice report, and then we'll dive into the linebackers. That was the plan for tomorrow. So we'll definitely be paying attention to that. But I think we'll wrap it up with this, Vince. Andy Milton fan said it very clearly. We're going to find out a lot about Joe Rudolph this year.
Oh yeah, that was the case anyway. True. But you take away your starting left tackle, that becomes even more true, for sure. Yep. So we will see what happens, and believe me, you stay locked into Irish Breakdown, and we will keep you abreast of the situation and everything that we know. You'll know. I mean, as far as we can tell,
But can I just say one thing? This is why when people say, well, you don't really need to recruit that position that year. You know, you signed this guy last year. You don't really need that guy. This is why you always recruit good players every year. That's because this is a tough spot for Notre Dame, but there aren't a lot of teams that can literally figure out which former top 100 recruit are we going to plug in at left tackle? Because that's the conversation. Tosh was a former top 100 recruit. Emil was a former top 100 recruit. And Gery Lambert obviously was a former top 100 recruit. There's going to be some talent there, Vince, to work with. It's just figuring out what's the best group of 5-man combination that you have. And and I remember there were some people like, why would you bring Tosh Baker back?
right now. Any more questions?
Yep.
Yeah.
You always got to be solid, strong, 2 deep, especially along the lines. And we're going to find out if they are. And so,
good point.
Joe Rudolph is either going to be a guy we're talking about. I don't know if he's the guy or a guy that we're going to say this dude needs a pay raise. One of those 2 things is going to be true by the time we get to the end of the season, I feel.
And there probably won't be a whole lot of down the middle, just saying. Hey, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. Jump on the boards.irishbreakdown.com. We had the information on there, I think, within about 7 minutes of the news coming down. We had a story up, and that's where you get your info, folks. So make sure you are a member of the boards.